Looks like we are live on Facebook and we are live on TikTok. Welcome everyone. Tap the screen, share the live. If you're on Facebook, type in hashtag live so I know that you're here with me. I know I tend to forget to talk to the people that are watching on Facebook and TikTok because the chat is so much more active. It's easier to get distracted by the TikTok chat. So welcome everyone. Tonight's topic is why so serious? And I'm going to talk about ways of having fun and learning how to do that because if you grew up in a childhood like mine, where there's complex PTSD, um, learning to you have to actually learn to have fun. This was not something that came naturally for me uh, as I was growing up because and sometimes it wasn't direct trauma, it was just more the circumstances that we were living in. And my mom was a single mom and had to raise us on her own most of the time, and those were the better times. And so it was always a matter of like, even when it wasn't schoolwork, it was like, okay, now you need to help around the house because mom's really tired, she's going to work tonight. We had to be quiet, so we couldn't do a whole lot of stuff. I had to help keep an eye on my younger brother who was 4 years younger than me, and just different things like that, so usually having to help. So sometimes it wasn't like a direct abuse kind of thing. It was just the circumstances that we ended up growing up in. And because of that, you end up thinking that this is just how things are, right? And I always had to put consideration for my brother. Yeah, a Gen X thing. Hey, Chris, good to see you back. Yeah, definitely a Gen X thing. Um, yeah, the things that we had to go through would be like out and out go to jail child abuse, right? And that was not even the bad stuff, right? So learning to have fun is something that I had to practice, and I didn't. And it's hard because when you first start to become aware of these things, um, and you start going through some of the therapy stuff, it can be really challenging to process the emotions because in order to get to that happier place, you first have to go down and you actually have to feel the pain and the loss and the trauma of what you went through and realizing that that's not how you should have been treated. And you're like, well, shit, that sucks. It's like, I thought things were okay. And you know what, in some cases maybe it is, and I'm not looking to borrow trouble here, but a lot of times what I found is things that are keeping me stuck in my current day to day, when I do the inner work, I can usually trace it back to where some of these thought patterns, these beliefs, these ideas first started to form. And they're often formed in childhood, and then we carry them through, and they become ineffective coping mechanisms or ways to operate in adulthood. And this is why it's really important to do that inner work. And so, for those of you that are first joining me, my name is Tina. I am a happiness coach, and I help people deal with the things that are keeping them stuck, the emotions, depression, anxiety, all of those kind of things, to help get you to a happier place. And this is a process, and I've been through this many, many times. And depending on where you are in your journey, whether this is your first time looking at inner work and growth, or if this is your 15th time. Glad you're able to understand our lives now. Yeah, exactly, Chris. Exactly. It's definitely challenging, and it's funny because I've done a lot of inner work. I remember um, when I I had been in therapy for years, and I was like really positive, really happy, and I went for this like job interview, and I remember the guy like being freaked out by me because he's like, you're really positive. And I'm like, yeah, I am. And I didn't realize he was actually insulting me. And I'm like, well, shit. That pendulum is swung to the other side because I went from being a kid that, was more quiet. Because one of the things I was thinking of is when I was growing up, um, because I was used to helping my mom out and I saw it as my responsibility to take care of my younger brother. And so I didn't like to play with other kids because I thought that was silly stuff. Like that's that's for kids. And because I was already taking on responsibilities as an adult, I didn't actually like playing with kids. They didn't make sense to me, and I like sitting around with the adults. So I often got praised for things like being quiet and that I was very mature for my age, and that I would sit at the table and I would just sit and I'd listen to the adults talk and I'd observe them. And I got a lot of praise for being quiet and just observing what's going on. But I also got a lot of praise when I would, because I was sitting there watching and I wasn't allowed to talk, so all I could do was sit there and observe. But when I did actually speak, I would come up with something that was pretty profound or wise, and they were like really shocked when I did that. And the funny thing is I never really took that praise to heart because um, to me, it was obvious, right? Because I was sitting there observing, watching, and paying attention to different behaviors. I'd noticed the tonality, I'd noticed the inflections, I'd noticed the facial features, body language, all that kind of stuff. And that isn't something that I was consciously aware of, obviously, as a kid, right? And I'm talking like grade one, grade two, right? Kind of pretty young. So I just enjoyed being around them. So when I was around kids, kids didn't make sense to me. um, so it was either work or I would get praised for being quiet and being insightful and being wise. So I didn't really learn how to play, although sometimes um, play was more of a punishment because I was often sent away so the adults could be adults and I had to go hang out with the kids. And I felt like that was always a punishment. And so even in school too, I loved being in school and I loved hanging around the teachers. So I would volunteer for extra chores and stuff like that because the idea of an adult actually being able to pay attention and give me support and feedback and guidance was amazing for me because my mom was always working, so she wasn't available. So just to have that kind of support, I don't ever remember my mom playing with me ever. Like, um, playing was something that I had to do, like with my brother. I had to keep, and that was, again, it was a chore to play, to have fun, because I had to go entertain my brother. That wasn't something that I wanted to do, it was something that I was told to do. So, learning to play and figure out what was actually fun for me was a big part of my healing process, a big part of my journey, and learning to be silly. Now, I I often just went along with what other people enjoyed because fun wasn't something that I ever sought, and the things that I thought were fun, other people thought I was weird, right? One of the things that I loved to do as a kid is I loved to go to the library. Why? Because it was quiet. Oh my God, I loved it. Nobody was allowed to talk at the library. And for me, growing up in a chaotic home where there was always fighting or yelling or some sort of drama going on, being in a library was like angels singing, ah, it was awesome. And so for me, and I loved to be able to get lost in a book, whether that was fiction, and I've read everything. Like I read fiction stuff, I read science, I read math books, I read all kinds of crazy stuff. And I just would get so immersed in them and I would forget the world. And that was one of my favorite things to do as a kid. Um, and so I would also do things like um, we went to summer camp. That was one of the few things I we did get to do. But again, it was a way for my mom to keep us busy because we were out of school. She still had to work. So there was a summer camp program. And I really loved that because they had like teenagers there. So they were older than I was, so young adults, but they would teach us different things, and I learned about leadership, and I always wanted to be as close to the leaders as possible, as close to the teachers as possible. Those are the ones that gave me positive attention, positive reinforcement, and so being able to align myself to them. Now the thing is I would also, although I was getting positive reinforcement on that side, I was also getting picked on by my peers because they thought I was teacher's pet, or, I was brown nosing or any of that kind of stuff. And I wasn't doing it trying to get favor. It's just I found them extremely interesting. And they didn't pick on me most of the time. Some of the teachers did, some were assholes, but the majority of them were good. And because I also actually tried to find ways to be helpful, because that's how I was conditioned in my childhood, the teachers also liked me because I wasn't a pain in the ass student. And I usually did what was asked. And I also sought out extra stuff and I tried to help the teacher and I would pay attention. And sometimes I'd also get in trouble because I'd be a little bit of a hall monitor and I'd tell the other kids to shut up so that we could hear the teacher. um, but that was just my way of having fun and doing those kind of things. And as I got older, when I would hang around other people, I was still in that taking care of my juniors kind of like mentality, right? I would, when I'd hang out with my cousins, they were fun. They got into all kinds of trouble. Like, I can promise, it's like whenever I was hanging out with my cousin, there would be stuff that would go down. We'd get in trouble, but not too much trouble because I was there to make sure that we didn't go too far, right? And hey, Mark, good to see you. So I would hang around with them, but I was also still anxious because, yes, I was there to let them have fun and I would crack jokes and I would observe. I would still continue to do that. I would observe and watch the behavior and I'd watch for the early warning signs of when, this is starting to get out of hand and pull everybody back in. And so those are the kinds of things that I would end up doing. So everybody liked me around because I prevented them from getting into too much trouble, but they still could have fun. So that was something, it's like, so having fun was not something that I did unless I was by myself or, although one thing that I did love to do growing up was going swimming. I loved swimming. You couldn't get me out of the water. I was always in a pool, always in the lake, any of that kind of stuff. Those were fun times, right? Going up to my aunt's cottage in Bancroft, that was really really good. And just telling stories, anything that was more intellectually stimulating, where we'd have conversations, we'd sit around the campfire, we'd make up these ghost stories and try to scare each other, and then we'd play card games, euchre, crib, board games, all of that kind of stuff. So there was actual social interaction, and that was something that was really novel for me because that was not something that was regular in my household growing up. Um, and it's not like I just it's not like I thought, oh, I had a bad childhood. I thought that was just normal. And so as I got older And people ask, like, do you have any hobbies or anything? And I was like, no, my hobby was I had like a spreadsheet that I would track budget stuff. And it's so funny that I have none of that right now. I used to be obsessed with tracking my spreadsheet, and I'd track all the information and I'd categorize stuff, and then I'd have all these color codings and different things like that. That was my fun because I was analytical, and fun had to be something that was also productive, right? So even when I did start to develop hobbies, most of the time I also turned them into a side hustle. So it's like I can't have fun for just the sake of having fun. So example, my artwork that I sell, right? Some of it I do more for personal, like, so like this one in the middle here and this one on the end are a little bit more art therapy. These other ones are more, they're abstract art that maybe somebody else would enjoy, right? But there's a purpose to the art therapy ones that I'm doing, and I'm gathering different pictures to be able to create something else that I have in mind. So, and even it's like I had a cake decorating business. Now that was something that, see, I never considered myself creative at all. And that probably stems from when I was in art class in like grade 6. There was an assignment that was given. I misunderstood the instructions, and then the teacher made fun of me in front of the whole class. So, long story short, and I also didn't know that learning art, I thought you had to be a natural talent. So, if you didn't instantly be able to pick it up, then you weren't good at it, right? And so this is also something too that I think a lot of us learn in some of our childhood experiences, that if you're not instantly good at something, then you don't you get labeled that you don't have a natural talent for it. You should give that up. You shouldn't try. You shouldn't do any of that kind of stuff. And I think that's a really negative thing. It's like a minor, um, I wouldn't call it a trauma, but it's an incorrect way to teach people, because anything can be a learned skill if you put the time and effort into it. There may be some things that you're going to have to work a whole lot harder. Like, I'm 5'3" for me to be a basketball player. And even though I was on the basketball teams, because I would try anything, I was willing to try anything. I was just terrible at any of the sports kind of stuff, but I was very enthusiastic to try. But I was terrible at it because I had a lazy eye, so that affected depth perception. But it was just something that I had to live with, because I had had 5 surgeries, like from when I was in kindergarten up until grade 5. I had surgeries where they'd fix one eye and then the other eye would go. And I believe now, obviously I didn't know it then, but I believe now part of that was my body responding to the trauma that I was going through, and not being able to see things clearly or correctly, that there was a skewed vision, literally, and it physically manifests in that way. And I didn't learn that until I started reading books like Louise Hay, How to Heal Your Life. And she talks a lot in that book about different ways that repressed emotions can start having a negative physical consequence in our body, and being able to learn to reaffirm in different ways to allow yourself to feel safe is one of the ways that you can counteract those physical ailments. Um, so, for example, one of the ones was around having back pain, was tied to financial fears. And I used to have a lot of financial fears when I was younger, and I was 19. And it's like, all the usual stuff people talk about of like, oh, it's your weight and everything, because everybody tried to tell me it was my weight, and I was probably about 140, maybe 150 pounds. I can promise you it was not my weight. It definitely was not my weight. There were a lot of other things, like I didn't know about drinking enough water, and learning that it's like if you don't drink enough water, that it's like trying to run your car without any oil. You're going to seize up. I didn't know things like stretching, physical activity, and that kind of stuff. And also the mindset of how that could possibly tie into um, having lower back pain, right? So learning those different things, starting to become like when I started to do therapy stuff, I started to become more aware of my body and understanding the sensations, because one of the problems with trauma, and especially around sexual abuse that I went through, that you disassociate, you disconnect. So you're not in tune with understanding how your body feels. And if you're not in tune with understanding how your body feels, you're also disconnected from your emotions and the feelings that are residing in your body. And you learn how not to pay attention to them. Now, there can be some really good benefits to that. However, um, there will be a point that comes in your life that can become a problem for you. And it's when it becomes a problem that we start to look together, we start to understand, okay, the stuff that's going on today, where did this originally come from? Where did this start? And that may not go all the way back to childhood. It might go back to your early 20s. It might go back to your teens. It might go back to a year ago, right? It's like, oh, you know what? I was fine up until this point, and then things changed. And these are the things. This is when I developed that new belief. This is when I developed that new way of thinking, and it has caught me here, right? And we don't go looking for problems. It's like when the problems find us, that's when we have to start looking for solutions and finding out where these things stemmed from. And so learning to have more fun in your life can really be counterintuitive, especially in the hustle and grind culture that we get online and all of that kind of stuff. But I also grew up in that, and there's a lot of good stuff. Please don't get me wrong, because I do believe in hard work and paying attention, but I am also somebody that doesn't know when to stop working, right? And I have to be told to relax and sit down. And that triggers that feeling of being punished again. Like when I'm told to go have fun, it's like, well, okay, for me, fun and where I got all my affirmation and all of my fulfillment was being praised for all the hard work that I did, for all the extra stuff that I did, and that I was so helpful and all those kind of things. So to take that away felt like a punishment for me. To have to, because when I was with the kids and having fun, that just meant I was older, so I should know better, and that just meant I had to take care of the kids. And so that wasn't me getting to play with the kids. That was me taking care of the kids, making sure they didn't fight, didn't get into trouble, all of that kind of stuff, right? So the only other times that I had fun was when I was completely alone, isolated. I didn't have to worry about anybody else and their energy. So being on my own was often where I ended up having fun. So learning to be in groups and learning to have fun in groups was something that I didn't really start doing until I was in my 20s. Now, I was active when it was at school. Like, so when I was at school, I would join all kinds of teams. I was in drama club, I was in the choir, I was in band, I was in I played volleyball even though I wasn't very good, but I had fun. I was always signing up for something. I always wanted to be part of the crowd. I loved being active within the structures, right? But I never socialized with anybody at school. I never brought them home. I rarely, a couple of times girls would invite me to like a sleepover or something, and that never went well. Um, they liked me beforehand and thought I was fun, and then I don't know, things got weird or something, and it really wasn't fun. And then usually they ganged up on me, and then it wasn't. So I didn't. I learned not to hang out with the girls because um, it just didn't fit. I don't know why. And so I carried that on, and it's probably why I gravitated towards more of a male dominated industry of transportation and logistics. And the women that I hung out with at work there, they were all very similar to me, more strong, independent women, could joke around with the guys and not get offended, all that kind of stuff. And that was just kind of normal for us. Um, but again, not only a couple of people that I was able to actually hang out with outside of work, right? And have those kind of friendships. So it can be really challenging to find what are those things that are fun, but it was having that common ground of a work environment, of things that we actually did together, and we would vent and complain about things that went on at work so that we didn't get too frustrated, and that was fun for us to let off some steam, right? um, but when I was in my 20s, again, I was part of the social club, and I really enjoyed being able to do that kind of stuff as well, right? um, and but again, it's work, right? So even in a social environment, I was always doing something behind the scenes. I was always doing some sort of work, and that was some of the ways that I would um, find fun, because I found it fun being able to be of use to other people, and to make their lives easier, right? And it just made me feel like there was something useful. So learning to have fun is um, is something that is not something that I do very easily. And so that was a big part of my recovery process, and starting to learn what is it that you like to do for fun. So, does anybody else in the chat, do you guys struggle with that, or do you remember what kind of things that you liked doing when you were a kid and having fun? Um, and the reason why I do that, because one of the things of why having fun is so important, and I learned this when I took the teaching adults. I went to college and I got a certification on being able to train and teach adults and learning how to do that. And what I've always found is that people liked and remembered and retained the things that I taught them, because I also found ways to make it fun, because I like doing this and I like being able to explain things in ways that were fun, made them laugh, and all that kind of stuff, and just kind of made them feel safe and comfortable. And because they were enjoying that experience, they retained it more. They were able to have fun with it. And I often got a lot of flack in some companies that I worked with, because they would feel like I wasn't taking things serious, because I often got people laughing and I got them having fun, and that was too noisy, and we should put our heads down and get to work, and why are you guys always fucking around and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, and it wasn't my team or my managers, because they actually knew me. It was more managers from other departments. They didn't like our team, seeing our team actually have fun, and we actually produced really good results, because our team was actually responsible for bringing in revenue to the company, where all the other teams around us were actually expense centers. And so we tended to get a little away with a little bit more. And they used to like to make fun of us, call us pirates and stuff like that. It's like, man, you can't win. It's like we're doing well, and it's like, But I would do that kind of stuff, and I was actually known for my laugh. And I'm not quiet when I do laugh, and it's more like that really bubbly energy. But I also get picked on that for it. So it's kind of like trying to balance some of this stuff of you start to learn to have fun, you start to tap into that and enjoying those different things. And really, the whole process of exploring what is fun, what do other people find fun, because what I find fun may not be what you find fun. And learning to observe and see what other people are comfortable with, right? Um, so I tend to be very open, and I know I worked with a girl that she was really much more closed, didn't like admitting mistakes. That was like fatal for her. Like it was terrible for her. But I'm more very open, and it's like especially because of the recovery stuff that I've done is like I lean into mistakes. It's like, yeah, I failed, I messed up, I made the mistake. And it's like, no, Tina, you shouldn't say that. Don't tell them that we made the mistake or the system was the problem, blah, blah, blah. Don't tell them that. Lie, hide. And I'm like, hell no. I did that throughout my childhood. And this is why it's really important to do this inner work, because especially in a business environment, because there are people with unhealed trauma in your environment that are causing disconnects within the business. They're hiding, they're covering things up, they're lying because they're terrified and they're afraid to be able to open up around those kind of things. And I can promise you that will cause unnecessary problems within the business. So, learning this inner work is really important at having people that are productive, that they feel safe, that they feel happy, and they learn not to, you know, to be open, to contribute, to be able to communicate, see what they see, and because a lot of times this is the thing, this one girl, she had her finger in a lot of different things. She was aware of a lot of the financials, and she often hid what she knew, and for fear that it was going to upset people. So she wouldn't communicate a lot of problems that were really important, and she would hold on to things, and she'd keep her cards close to her chest. One, she was afraid people were going to take that over or take it off of her plate, and she wouldn't be valuable anymore if people knew, because she was the only one who knew how to do that. So for her, her value all stemmed from being the only one who knew how to do that. She particularly didn't like me because one time I got assigned to take something off of her plate. Number one, that raised all kinds of threat alarms for her. And me being me is this wasn't a personal thing. I went in, I'm like, here, just tell me what it is. And she had all these extra steps and processes, and I'm like, well, why do you do it that way? And why do you do that? Well, she had all these extra processes in place because she was too afraid to confront other team members, other departments to get the information that she needed. So she ended up creating this really elaborate process that, um, because she was too afraid to speak up about things. And so I went in there, I dove in, I tore the whole thing apart, which didn't make me her best friend, but I tore the whole thing apart, streamlined the system, documented the process, rolled it out, and then handed that off to a more junior person, because the thing is why they brought me in is they needed her to focus on other things, but she had too many things going on because she had this big elaborate process. Um, and of course, when you go in to fix something, it's going to get worse before it gets better. And oftentimes, when you are cleaning things up, you may expose other people that either they haven't been doing their jobs, they haven't been following the processes, they've been putting all this extra work into things. And so oftentimes you don't become a really good friend of everybody. But I would do it in a way that I was there to get the job done, but I also would spend time, because I would spend time cultivating a connection, a relationship with the person. I would get them laughing about things because I knew I was doing things that was going to hurt their feelings. I knew I was doing things that, and I just didn't want them to take that personally. So no, not only would I be really efficient with getting the job done, streamlining the process, but I would also be able to, hey, Colin, good to see you back, welcome back. I would make sure that that connection, and I would try to reduce, because I recognize the signs, because I've done the inner work. So I've recognized the signs, and I allowed the other people to feel safe, that it wasn't a threat, but we were going to work together to get this stuff cleaned up, right? Thank you so much. I appreciate you sharing and tapping the screen and sharing the love and the likes and all that kind of stuff. I really appreciate the support. Um, so learn this is why it's like I would use fun and connection and joking around and all of that kind of stuff as a way to soften some of the blow of being able to be really effective and efficient and clean up processes and streamline things, because when you're doing this stuff, people have all kinds of emotional reactions. um, they have all kinds of attachments to the work that they're doing, and if you do it in a way that you just kind of barge in, you're not aware of that emotional connection, they're going to be resistant, they're going to hide things, they're going to avoid things, they're not going to be open, and then you're not going to be able to know what the real problems were. Because I saw this woman, she hid so many things, and sometimes the higher ups, they knew it, but they couldn't get that information out of her because she just hung on to everything, thinking that that would keep her safe and keep her protected in her role. And unfortunately, that caused a lot of problems, a lot of fights, and a lot of arguments, and a lot of bad feelings between higher ups and stuff like that. But they often felt like they were at her mercy as well. Hey, Joseph, thank you so much for tapping the screen and sharing the live. I appreciate you. Um, so this is why it's important to make sure that you're bringing fun into the work environment, into your life, and to be able to make sure that you're doing some of that inner work of what is fun for other people as well, and doing that in a way that they feel comfortable, so that they feel safe, that they start to open up. And because of this, the way that I handled her, she would often open up, and I'd give her lots of praise for the things that I'd pay attention to that she did like to do. So one of the things that she liked to do, she liked to bring in candies and treats for everybody. And so she would like put this in the middle of the table, because she found that we were a lot nicer when we had chocolate. Mostly women in that one department, and then we had two guys, one IT guy and one other sales guy with us. But yeah, so she would bring in chocolate. That would help kind of calm the savage beasts from time to time. So guys, take note. Chocolate is always a good shield. um, so learning fun things can be interesting as you start to explore, especially if you didn't play very much as a kid like I did. And learning to do that in a way, and I'm still probably still going to be more prone to turning something that's supposed to be fun and just for me and a hobby into something that's actually productive, or it's a side hustle. I like, when I did cake decorating, right? So I'm like, hey, here's something that I could do. And it all started because I had to bring something in for a potluck. and I decided that I wanted to try making one of those fancy fondant cakes, and I did it as the company logo, and I tried making flowers with the company colors and everything, and I did it like one of our business cards. That's what I did the cake as. And everybody went crazy over it. And I was just like, I don't even like cake. But I was trying, I looked up, I spent time researching recipes, and I like would get obsessed with it too. Like when I did my cake decorating. So I would spend hours and hours and hours reading about different cake recipes, and I would compare, um, you know, okay, this one has got this much baking soda, this one's got this much, this one has this kind of cocoa powder, what are the differences? And I would do all of this kind of research. I'd read the comments of what people would, oh, this was really good, but I found it dry, or I added this, or I took away that. And I would read all of these things, and I would not only take that recipe, then I would, and it's funny because everybody's like, oh, for baking, because I had this mindset, baking, it's got to be exact, it's got to be precise. And I knew I was a good cook because I could like throw things together. I kind of had my grandmother's talent in that kind of stuff. And so cooking was no problem. Baking, that seemed frivolous and fun. So I never did anything like I never baked cookies, I never baked muffins or cakes or any of that kind of stuff. It was just not something that we had growing up, and it was not never something that I did, and it wasn't something that I enjoyed eating anyway, right? Because my mom was always like, "Oh, that's too sweet. We don't like that." She liked her carbs as starches. So potatoes, rice, bread, she loved that kind of stuff, right? But so for me, I liked chocolate. Chocolate and fruit, those are my favorite. Chocolate dipped fruit, bonus, love it. Um, so when I started doing baking and learning all this kind of stuff, I'm like, oh, it's actually, you can actually create your own recipes. And that made me much more interested. And I did that by researching, and I spent hours, like hours of all of my free time researching stuff. And then I would go, as I was reading that, then I would go and I'd try different recipes. And I was like, oh, this one sounds interesting. And it's like, oh, this is like orange creamsicle. And I wanted to do different things, like pina colada cake, or, um, you know, I'd make all these different things up, and I would spend hours and hours researching it. And then I did the fondant cake, and then I took that into work. And I was like, well, that was fun bringing it in, but we don't have like potlucks every week. It was only a special thing. And so I was like, well, I can't continue this hobby because I don't even like to eat cake. So what am I going to do with all this cake that I'm making? And one of the girls at work said, well, you could, I'll pay for it. I love cake. If you want to make cake, I'll buy it from you. And I was like, you're on. Okay, great. I have a subsidized hobby now. Yes. Always trying to find ways to make money with the things that I'm doing, right? And so I started making cakes, and I got to practice that craft. And I liked being able to make all kinds of flowers with it and decorations, and I'd bring it in, and then people would ooh ah over it, and then they kind of get jealous, and then they'd order it, and they made stuff for their kids, and then I just kind of, whatever they paid me, I'd go out and buy more tools and supplies and all that kind of stuff. And I did that until about 2018, and then I had moved, and it was too far of a commute, to, like, it was an hour and a half drive one way. So that extra 3 hours of time of just driving back and forth to work, and most of the people that I made cakes for were people that I worked with. I worked for a large company, so um, I really enjoyed that, but I kind of put that to the wayside. And I realized, although the baking and stuff was fun, I liked that, and I liked creating those recipes, and I liked when people said, "Oh my God, this is really good. Normally I don't like cake, but I really like your cake." And I'm like, "Yeah, I normally don't like cake either, but my stuff's good." And it just was a little bit um, too much to continue on with it, and I realized I liked the decorating part of it more. And so that's when I started getting into, and I started painting, and I started learning how to paint. And I also took those same techniques. And if you check out my Instagram page of the business that I had, it was called Smoochie's Creations. You'll see some of the cakes that I did where I did a painting and then I replicated that in cake form. And so that was a fun technique. And now I just do the painting, and occasionally I'll bake some cookies. So I posted some of those the other day. But these are different things that I had to start to learn to explore. What are the things that I actually like to do that is fun and enjoyable? And for me, I didn't know because up until that point, playing with a spreadsheet and doing the budget numbers and tracking that and putting little graphs and charts was my form of fun, other than video games. Video games were fun. I did enjoy that as well, but that was also a numbing tool. So that was a distraction. So it was more of an addiction rather than something that I truly enjoyed. It's not like I was craving playing video games. It was something I did because of stress and because I was angry. And one of the ways to soothe it is my husband at the time, he would give me a controller because I was cranky. So here, go kill something in a video game, right? So that's a good thing, I guess. um, but other than World of Warcraft, I really did enjoy that, and that one I played on my own. But that was more because I enjoyed chatting with people on my online. World of Warcraft was my online gateway drug to social media, because I would stand around and I would chat with people, but it was more the social interaction and being able to help people. Online with different things because we would get talking. Some guys would chat with me about how they broke up with their girlfriend and that they were feeling down and stuff like that. Others, they'd talk about their parents, right? Because some of them were young kids. They'd talk about their parents and troubles that they were having. Others were guys that were overseas in the military and they were just looking to blow off some steam, right? And play the game, right? So um, it was good to be able to connect with people and collaborate and teamwork of actually doing raids and running a guild and all that kind of stuff. So again, I found some way to turn this into work, but it's something that I love to do. I like to be busy. I like to be productive, even when I'm playing and having fun, right? So, and if I was better at sports and maybe had some better hand-eye coordination, I probably would have been a sports junkie. Um, but again, that wasn't something that we ever had um, time or money for when I was growing up. And it was something that I always wanted to do. Like I wanted to, because I had friends that were either in gymnastics or they took piano lessons, and those were all things I wanted to do. They went to Girl Guides. I begged and begged to try and do any of those kind of things, and I really never got to the chance to do that. And it wasn't something that my mom ever wanted to do or be involved with. And I remember feeling sad because of that as a kid. So um, unfortunately, I didn't have my own kids. I had cats, but that was one of the things I was actually looking forward to doing if I ever became a mom, where I could be involved with uh, kids and going to school and doing going on their field trips with them and making crafts with them, being involved in their homework, just really being present because that was something that I lacked growing up. And understandably so, because my mom, most of the time, she was a single mom, so she was working more than one job, so I get it. And that's sometimes just the way it goes, right? But unfortunately, that wasn't an experience that I got to do, but I get to do that with myself of figuring out the different things that I like to do. And gardening is another one. And I did learn that in my 20s when I was going through my therapy stuff, is creating a like I had this really nice long balcony in my first apartment that I was in by myself. And I had that decorated up. I had all kinds of different flowers, and of course, nothing. I didn't have anything organized or succinct patterns that I would normally do now, but because I wanted all of the flowers. I wanted, oh, it's like, oh, that one's pretty and that one's pretty and this one's pretty. So I'd have all these different flowers and didn't know anything about gardening. It just, that's my typical style of just diving in, figuring out what to do and learning about that process. And like learning the different names of the flowers. And at one point, because I always had my full time job and then I always had some sort of part time job on the side just to keep me out of trouble, I guess. And I actually worked in a nursery and like a really high end garden center part time, and that was just watering the flowers in the garden center, and that was my part time job. And the funny thing is the very different treatment that I got. So I was fairly high. I was at that point I was a supervisor in my corporate job in transport and logistics, well looked up to, well respected within my full-time job that I did. And then to get a part-time job watering flowers and being treated like I was a complete idiot was not a fun experience. And in fact, they'd always talk down to me when I did extra. So example, there was a customer that had come in and he was looking to spend quite a bit of money and he wanted some help, and he saw me watering the flowers and I was the only one in the section. So he's like, hey, I'm looking for these kind of things. And the guy must have spent probably 500 to $1,000 in all of these planters and these hanging baskets that he wanted, and I was helping him gather them up and putting them together. And I got in trouble because I wasn't watering the flowers. And I'm like, are you stupid? I just helped one of your customers buy a bunch of things that, because if he was wandering around, he wouldn't have picked all of those. He wanted my input, my advice of which flowers look good together and which basket. So I helped with the sales process. I should have got a commission, not gotten in trouble for that, man. So needless to say, it didn't last too much longer, and it was towards the end of the season anyway. But yeah, that was my experience with gardening. And see, I always turn something that is fun and I get obsessed about it and I turn it into a work project, right? So, but this is part of the process of healing and bringing that into your work environment, also into your training environment, because people that have fun and they learn things in a fun way, they are much more likely to retain that information, remember it, and act on it because it is something that is fun, especially if you're having to do something that's challenging for people. Like change management, you're changing processes, getting their input, their feedback, and giving them that positive reinforcement when they help create a fun environment as well, when they contribute in their way. And you may have people that have different ideas of what fun is, right? Um, some people, and I know there were a lot more. It's funny. What I find funny is that people see me as the outgoing one, and I've always been known most of the time as the shy one, right? The quiet one, which is so hilarious to me that I just I'm just a misfit, never fitting in anywhere, and that's okay. I'm cool with that because I'm either too shy for the outgoing extrovert kind of people, or I'm too outgoing for the shy introverted people. And it's like I've got a foot in both worlds, and I guess that actually makes me pretty valuable because then you can pivot, you can adapt, you can fit in whichever crowd that you're in. And I think that comes from one of the benefits of um, growing up in the home that I did. So it wasn't all bad, and it's a matter of learning to take some of those things that you've been through in the past that maybe were negative and finding some sort of positive, finding the strength that came from the experiences that you may have been through. So my ability to observe and pay attention and be quiet were actually very strong assets for me in the work environment because I was able to pick up and read people's um, emotions, how they were reacting to things, which made me really valuable for some of those people that are not so empathetic and they are much more competitive types. And being able to pick up on those emotions and kind of give them cues made me really valuable as a second in command, right? So you can find strengths um, even with some of those people that are very serious and being able to have fun. They found me fun because I could listen to the anger and the frustrations that they were dealing with without being afraid of them, without judging them, and being that safe space for them. And I had the stuff I had been through, any of the stuff that they wanted to scream and yell and be upset about in a work environment was still so much safer than anything I grew up in. So, yeah, that that made things a lot easier and provided them that safe place that they could open up, they could have fun, and they were always confused because they saw me as the quiet, shy one, but I wasn't timid because I could listen to the things that they were going through and I'd actually laugh and giggle about different things. And they were like, huh, that really diffused the situation for them and they found it fun that they could vent and not be seen as the bad guy because oftentimes they're told to tone it down. They're too mean, they're too aggressive, they're too this, they're too that. And so somebody like me that comes along that can hear them, listen to them, um, not that I always agreed with them, but I could see their side and I could empathize with what they were going through, but I could also offer them a different perspective and allow them to shift in a way that they were not capable of seeing the other person's side. They could only see their way because those strong challenger type people, they're very focused and not a whole lot of time for emotions and getting into all of that kind of stuff. So I was a way to help speed up the process and bridge the gap between the team members that maybe weren't as driven as they were and being able to help guide them into, oh, this is what these guys are saying. If we do it in this way, they're much more likely to produce the results that you're looking for. And they're like, oh, okay, I never would have thought of that. And it's like, really, I got to be that? I got to handhold people, blah, blah, blah. It's like, I got you. I got you. It's all right. I'll take care of it. And be able to convey what it is that they could communicate to me in a way that they didn't have to try and sugarcoat anything. They could just say it like it is, say it how they needed to say it without me getting upset or offended by it. And then I could communicate that to the team in a way that they would be much more open and responsive to receiving the information. So it's almost like a translator. And for me, that was fun because when everybody was getting along on the team and we were able to win together, to me, that's fun. So that's what I thought I would bring up for a Friday night conversation and talk about bringing fun so that you're not so serious, because when you're in that serious, never having fun, you are much more closed off. You're in more of a fear state. When you can bring that fun, you're much more open, much more loving, much more relaxed, much more creative and innovative and productive. So you definitely want to learn to do the inner work so that you can shift that perspective, get more out of yourself, more enjoyment, more love, more life, more happiness in your life. And you can bring that to your team's life as well so that they are feeling happier about things as well and much more productive. So, guys, with that, we're going to wrap it up. I know I rambled, but hopefully that was fun. If you are new to my channel, please check out my YouTube channel, Coach Tina B125. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you get notified when I upload the training videos. And I will be having some changes that are coming up. I am launching my new coaching program, and I will be revealing that on my birthday, which is coming up very soon. Oh, geez, 4 more days. I got a lot of work to do. So that is coming up on April 17th. So I'm looking forward to being able to reveal that and what the program's all about and how you can work together with me with some happiness coaching. And it's an 8-week program that we'll be going through. So guys, with that, I'm going to wrap it up for tonight. I hope you have a great night and we will talk to you again tomorrow. Bye.